My name's Jason Salt, owner of Salty Robot Productions. I've been in laser industry for 20 plus years. I started out with lasers in the basement of my house. My dad, was a laser operator when I was a kid, and so we had laser equipment in the basement, and I was able to hook that up as a teenager and get my first dose of laser abstracts and hanging out with my friends and stuff. And then from there it led to getting a degree in electrical engineering and starting to build my own electronics, and then that led to building my own laser projectors, which led to getting laser software and start actually making my first choreographed laser shows back around like 2013, 2014. That's when I started getting involved with Salim and going to those events and just seeing all the great people that are out there in the industry that are making really similar content, and just having a good time with it. And and so then that really kind of pushed me to make better content. And in 2017 I won my first ILDA award for laser abstract, and then followed that up with a second first place award in 2018. And that's what really spurred me to start my production company and actually pursue it as a monetary business to try to get my work out there and get paid for the work I like to do and really enjoy it.
I didn't know about you that you had, so you grew up with lasers, like,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so we had, like, we started out with a little helium neon red laser and hooked that up to a couple function generators and a VCA, and was able to just make the absolute most basic of sine and cosine patterns, making lysogyes and stars, and it was all in red. And then when green laser pointers came out, we actually swapped out the Heaney for just a green laser pointer because it could be brighter and more in your face. And so that was fun. We just hook it up. Back then it was like $100 for a green laser pointer, and you hook that up, and now all the patterns were in green. And so then did that for a while, and then when the first RGB ideas came out, it was like, ooh, now I can take this to the next level and and get some full color action going. Yeah.
How did you get started with lighting design, or do you do
so
design?
Really I don't do a lot of lighting design, but when now that I've been getting involved with Mercury, I'm kind of doing the reverse as a lighting designer. I'm coming from laser, getting involved with Mercury, which is then pushing me into the realm of lighting design. So, a few years ago, I reached out to Adam Rao and was like, hey, what's this Mercury system? Like, I want to learn this. Give me some resources to start educating myself on how to run this system. And so, he sent me some videos and got me up and running. And so within like 6 months, went from knowing nothing about Mercury and really lighting desks at all, and started working with a Camsys PC wing, and watching a lot of videos, talking to different people that are in the lighting industry to kind of understand, like, I came from the background of lasers and what laser cues are, but then it's like, now I'm thinking in gobos and functions and position movements and beam menus and stuff. And so it was a little bit of an adjustment. But then once I started kind of realizing, these are all just menus that select different attributes on the pattern, then it became really easy to make a laser show really quickly using Mercury. And that's really what has kept me interested and really pushing me further to actually start pulling in some of those, like, just lighting design, getting light fixtures intermixed with lasers. I'm just now starting to kind of scratch the surface on some of that. Locally in Charlotte, I've been working with a friend of mine. He plays cello, and I've been providing laser to some of his cello work. And we did our first event, and like, he wasn't lit up. he was playing in the dark, and it was basically the only light was from the stand, from his music stand. And it made me realize really quickly, I'm like, no, he's just as much of a talent as the laser on the screen. Like, I need to light this guy up. And so, that's what, made me go out and actually like purchase my first moving head, spotlight, so that way I could, light up anybody who's playing an instrument while I'm also doing, laser abstracts next to them, so that it can be really truly a collaboration between, two medias coming together. And like, it is necessary to have non-coherence mixed with coherent light at the same time. Like, you really need that balance, especially for live music.
So did you find that you were like at an advantage coming in from lasers, or did you feel like you had to catch up to kind of get them to work together? Like, did you already kind of know it was easy for you to get started using them together?
I felt like it was pretty easy to start using them together, because you're still dealing with either timelines or cues, button presses to make certain looks happen. But I definitely, the lighting world is a different workflow than your typical laser workflow. But using Mercury really blends it together really well, because it is, you come to realize that, okay, this laser projector can make 5 or 6 heads, just like any Parcan light or any moving head. It's a head. It's got gobos, it's got color, it's got position, and pan, tilt, whatever, rotation. And so once you kind of come to that realization that it's just a set of moving heads inside this laser projector box, then you can start to realize, oh, wait a minute, now if I fan these heads out, now I have 4 circles next to each other, and then I add this effect to it. Now the circles are kind of undulating around the screen. Okay, now let's add a color effect, and then immediately you have something that's interesting to look at, and you've only spent maybe 5 minutes of work, because you're using a lighting desk. You're able to get through the menus very quickly. You're also using a really reliable piece of hardware. I mean, all the major brand of lighting desks, they have built those things to be really, resistant to wear and tear. They're meant to go out on tour. And to be able to, run your laser from a piece of hardware that has a ton of support from the, lighting industry, is rugged enough to go out on tour and go to these different shows with you, but also easy enough to make changes on the fly if the customer all of a sudden wants, oh, I don't like green, I want it to be blue. You're just going in and you're changing the color just like you would for any moving head light. So with my doing laser abstracts, my rig is actually 4 laser projectors that are layered on top of each other. And at first, before I did Mercury, it was I had a just straight analog, old school analog with knobs and switches to just make patterns. I had a LSX, which I kind of have made my own live LSX file where I can use MIDI buttons to change into different patterns, and have switches and knobs where I can manipulate those patterns and do some busking with LSX. I added a second analog output that's just a mimic of the first one, and then I have a radiator. Well, then adding Mercury to it, what I realized is you can switch between builders enabled and external input on the fly in between cues. So now in the middle of a song, instead of using 3 hands to flip all these switches to turn analog and LSX off, to turn like radiator on or turn Mercury on, now it's like one cue advance, and it all switches it in the background very quickly. I mean, I even ran chase timing on just switching between external input and builders enabled, just to see like what the limitation is. There is a limitation, but I mean, you're talking sub 1 second limitation. So very easily in the middle of a show you can use this this function, and so you can develop a bunch of stuff in Mercury. Like I said, I have 4 laser projectors. They're all set up with 4 advanced heads. So I have 16 patterns just in Mercury that I can layer on top of each other and intermix however I please. And then with one button press, I can switch over and be doing analog. So for me, I'm actually using Mercury as like a show master where, I'll have a playlist and I'll set up a song on each page of, my Kansas workspace. And then, so each page is whatever faders I need for that song, but it's also whatever cue stacks I need for that song too. And so then just in the middle of the song, one of the cues might be switch over to analog. Mm-hmm. What that also allows me to do though is it frees up my hands so that I can be making adjustments to the abstract side or to the LSX side to prepare it for whatever that next moment is. Because with my rig, it truly is, live busking controlled to a certain extent. I have an idea of what I want to do on each song, but if I perform those back to back, there's going to be small differences because it really truly is performed live. Mm-hmm. This is not a press play and go sit down rig. You're actively controlling what the audience sees.
What other limitations do you see with lasers?
Well, I mean, with lasers in general, you're always going to have the limitation of your scan rate. Like, everybody's trying to push it as hard as you can without flicker. That's the game you're playing with laser. But at the same time, that media punches through and accents a screen way more than any non-coherent light can. Even LED walls, as cool as they are and as immersive as they are, there's still certain things that lasers can do that even LED walls cannot. Mm-hmm. And but with that said, you always, anytime you introduce lasers into a show, you're always going to have your safety concerns that you don't have with regular non-coherent lights. You're always going to have limitations of scan rate. But I think it's different paintbrushes for different opportunities in a song.
What are lasers better at than other lights, and how they would integrate? You talked about it a little bit, but integrating with other fixtures.
Yeah, so lasers can really provide the punch to accent some colors. They can also fill the environment. Like if you're doing beams overhead, you're going to be able to put light over top of people's heads, and that's something that non-coherent light can do, but laser does better. Mm-hmm. And so just filling up your environment and being really immersive in the environment is one plus. And then just with abstracts, because it's it's lines, and you don't have a lot of bleed from the light, you can actually do really precise patterns and stuff, which is, again, it's another tool in the drawer to make a song look the way you want it to look. Mm-hmm. I also look at regular lighting as more of provides atmosphere, whereas laser provides lasers are what pulls you into a song. They're because you're trying to match the beat, match the tempo. The laser is the visualization of what you're hearing, whereas the lights are just kind of the ambiance, if you will. Mm-hmm.
Does that have to do from a mechanical or even a physics perspective with how quickly lasers can respond? They can change colors and cues literally instantly. Yeah. And that especially helps when you're doing a really, really fast song, or you want really, really crisp transitions between beats or anything like that.
Exactly. The galvos on a laser projector can move so much faster than any motor in a moving head that's what's allowing you to, really get in sync with. No matter what the speed of the song is, you're able to just really get in sync with that song and match it. And as soon as you start layering up enough different looks to the different sounds in the musical piece, once you start hitting enough of those, everybody's brain really thinks that, what I'm seeing is what I'm hearing at the same time. But there's also the caveat to that, though, is if you're out of time, it only takes one couple things, where people are like, wait a minute, that's not right. So you do have to be on top of your game when it does come to lasers. Like, a moving head light is going to be a lot more forgiving when you're not quite in sync with the music, or it's not quite flashing at the right beat. That's a little bit more forgiving. Lasers, it's a lot more noticeable. But I also think that's what makes it better too.
What are your general thoughts on, and I'm specifically talking about like Mercury units, color with either mixing or matching to other parts of your rig?
So color on Mercury is one thing that I really like. Because it's a lighting desk, you have the full palette of color available to you, and you literally can move your RGB dials to make whatever color you want, and then save that off as a palette really, really quickly, and then you can have that color choice for forever and beyond with just one button press. You don't necessarily get that with other strict laser workflows. Usually you always have to go in and reselect those color options, whereas you can save that off as a palette in Mercury. I find that really beneficial. But just the color matching in general, I found to be, it opens up a lot more color options for me when I'm designing. So, and especially with running color effects through Mercury, you're really getting, if I run a rainbow effect or something, it really is running the whole gamut of the rainbow, where sometimes in other laser workflows, like the red, green, and blue punch, but you don't have the colors in between as much. And so that's what I've really liked the color aspects of Mercury. It's one thing I was like, man, if I could get the color added to an external input somehow, I don't have no idea if that's possible, but I've always thought that would be a cool intermix.
Yeah. What is your thoughts on the zoning process?
I'm glad you asked that, because zoning with Mercury, with the idea that my lighting desk is like my master of my entire console, I do all my zoning in Mercury. And so I set up, whatever my screen size is, I go in to my masters and I adjust my master box to whatever the screen size is. And then the beautiful part is even when I switch over to external inputs, it's keeping the scaling. So now I don't have to worry about scaling in my other, LSX or analog or radiator. I can run those at 100%, but then they still get scaled down through Mercury. And it gives me a level of safety because I'm switching between all these different workflows on the fly. But in the back of my mind, I know that everything is going to maintain on that screen, because, Mercury's doing that legwork in the background.
Yeah.
But also, too, just zoning in has become so much faster. Because, I'm trying to zone 4 projectors at the same time, layered on top of each other. And so, I start out with just, one head, make the master rectangle, full, rectangle, get that matching the screen, and then I switch back to just a circle. And then I do locate on all my heads, get them all to be circles, and then all I'm doing is having to just layer those circles on top of each other and just resize them so that all the circles are just in it. It's decreased my zone in time tremendously. I can zone in 15, 20 minutes, whereas in other environments, there's going through a lot of different menus to get access to each laser at any given time. And I find it just takes longer in other workflow environments than it does in the Mercury environment.
What are some of your opinions on or experiences with lasers before you started using Mercury and xlaser products?
So like I said, I got started with LSX. It was at the time the budget option that made sense to me, and I think that has a lot of capabilities on its own as a program, and it makes some really, really cool patterns. But what I found is when it came to the live environment, there is some limitations that you hit, and then with like, it's there. I use it when customers need it. I have. It can make stuff pretty quickly as well, but then there's just a lot of headaches with, like, I don't like having to be forced to do an update and when I'm at a customer site and all of a sudden stops working. Never had that happen with a lighting desk.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a thing in the lighting industry, quite frankly. It's like, you know, you have choices when you're running your stuff, and with it feels like you don't have the choice. Like, you have to do whatever they want you to do, whether you're, you know, I've been on a site where I did not have internet connection and, you know, doesn't work, and it's like, you gotta call, you gotta do all this other stuff, you gotta like drive down to a McDonald's just to get Wi-Fi so that I can update this thing and then come back, and it's just an extra step that I feel is like not needed. You know, there's other ways to do it. But I mean, can do some amazing things too. You know, the 3D environments with is, I think, one place that is really untouched by any other workflows. But for me personally, I like being able, my time is limited, so I like being able to make shows quick, make cues quick. And I have found that I can, maybe it's just the way I think or whatever, but I can, on a lighting desk, I can get to where I want to be a lot faster and have a look that I like that's going to work out just fine for whatever show I'm doing, a lot faster than I can in some of the other work environments.
And obviously, like, when you're on, let's say on stage, but like when you're setting up at the venue, like, you need that dependability, reliability, and speed that you get from, you know, the you know, Mercury, you know, and that more traditional, like, lighting console based control system. You know it's going to work, you know it's going to work quickly, and you know it's going to work with the rest of things you have.
Yeah, the last thing you want to do is try to explain to your customers, like, why you're behind schedule. You know, and they don't care that it was because you had to drive down to McDonald's to update your software. They do not care about that. They just want to see the laser, you know what I mean? And so having, you know, less worry about that has been really nice.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on build quality of our units, the menus, just the physical aspect of the xlaser projector?
Yeah, the menus on the back of the projector, super easy to use. I like that you can flip the menu upside down as needed, because sometimes I hang my projectors upside down. Getting the menu so I don't have to, like, make that change in my mind is really nice. And I mean, just, yeah, the fact that, you know, you can get to the scaling, you can get to the color balance through the back of the projector is nice. You know, so yeah, that all the menu systems are really great.
Awesome.
Have you been doing a gig or even like at a venue, and you'll be talking with like the other, like the house LD or like someone else, you know, related to the lighting, and they've like asked you about like the laser setup you're using or things like that, or like reactions you've gotten from whether it's other people in the lighting world or just like clients or anything like that, like what they're saying about you know, how it all looks, you know, in the end, and kind of the result of the show?
Yeah, the only experience I've had with that is did an AEW gig, and the lighting designer there wanted to have like every single light on when the lasers were supposed to be on, and then didn't understand why the lasers didn't look good. And like, again, it was, you know, lasers are the icing on the cake, but at the same time, like, you got to give them their space too. And, you know, I think that there wasn't exactly an understanding that, like, lasers can't punch past
Everything
when you have all the lights on for, you know, so, but like overall though, like, I haven't had a ton of experience actually working with the, you know, lighting designer.
Do you get feedback from audiences or just people come up to you like, oh, that was great, or oh, what about this? Questions or anything about that?
Yeah, so especially with my console, I get a lot of people that come over and want to check it out, because it is like this two-tiered, you know, box of switches and knobs, and they're like, you know, what is this? Did you, like, you know, so I explained to them, like, literally this is what makes the laser show. If I stand here with my hands in my pocket, this thing does nothing but display one pattern, right? And so when I start to kind of talk through, you know, the process of, you know, how I'm making the show, I think it makes it, you know, that much more impressive for them. But yeah, I nearly every show I do, I always have people come to me at the end of the show, giving me feedback about what they liked in the show, and and it's even led to more work, even, and just kind of showing them, I think that because it's different than the normal, that a lot of people find a lot of interest in some of the stuff I'm doing.
What do you use to create your abstracts? And has Mercury helped with abstracts, or do you use it with your abstracts, or is it kind of a separate kind of a deal?
So I have a radiator, sometimes on the weekend, I might just sit down with it and sit there and twiddle the knobs and make patterns and then save them off for later use. But then I also do the same thing with Mercury too. I'll just get in and, just start fooling around with, well, let me add, let me take this head and I'll do this effect on it. Now let me layer something else. And then I just save it off in my Q store, and then I'll just have it there. And then when I actually want to sit down and make a show, that's when I'll go back through my Q store on the lighting desk, and I'm like, all right, what kind of looks good for this song? Is any part of this usable? And I might have, 4 heads layered on top of each other doing different things, and then decide, well, actually really just 2 out of the 4 is what looks like it'll work for this segment of the song. And so then I'll just include that in the programmer, and then just, intensity out the other things I don't want, and then just start making my Q stack from there. And then same thing, when I'm adding radiator or LSX elements, all of the base patterns are designed previously, but at my fingertips to use whenever I want. And so one of the next steps I want to take with the lighting desk is actually use MIDI commands to control the radiator. Mm-hmm. So that way I can change my menu files and which pattern with the lighting desk. So then that way I don't even have to press any of the buttons on the radiator, and it can go 10 files away and then change to this other pattern. And again, just freeing my hands up to do other things, because on the analog side there is no saving patterns.
Right.
You're making those patterns on the fly, so oftentimes I'm trying to make some patterns on the analog side while I'm displaying these other pre-canned Q store patterns. And so just having the ease of having that stuff in memory and then using it as needed frees my hands up to do other things.
I think one thing that you mentioned earlier that I think we've also asked Steve, we've also asked Dave, in doing these interviews and asking these questions, is you said being able to take the color from Mercury and have it go out to an external input, but also any other things that for our benefit, to make it better for others and also make it better for more people and more people doing different types of lighting design, different types of laser art, maybe not just with the Mercury system itself, but just in general, what you'd like to see, features you'd like to see, or any sort of improvements that that we could target for the future of this whole system.
So with Mercury, there's a few features I could see adding. One would be basically a zoom to 200%. So you have your bass gobo that might be the Pink Floyd prism with the rainbows, but it's whatever size it is, and you can only go smaller. Mm-hmm. Being able to make that bigger has some benefits, and even with simple circles or squares or triangles, being able to start them at a scale factor of 1/8, but then blow it up to even outside of the screen. Mm-hmm. Now when you run a Q from 1/8 scale to say 200% scale, and they're back-to-back cues, you can have a fade between those, and so then it will explode out of the screen, in time with the music. That's a big feature that would add a lot of capabilities to Mercury. Some minor things would be having a little finer control on size and position. You're 0 to 255 right now. If there was an additional encoder that was like your fine adjustment. So then you'd have coarse and fine adjustment. But that's a small feature. That's like just a convenience kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, like my hope is that there's continued development in Mercury, that new features are made available, that even new parameters are added to the firmware file, so that way more capabilities are there. I mean, there's definitely a hurdle between like when you deploy this out into the field, it could mess up pre-existing shows, because then now you might have parameters in different memory locations. So that's a hurdle that has to be crossed. But I don't want to see Mercury just only be what it is today and never have any more improvements. Like my hope is that it continues to keep adding more stuff to it, and then it just adds more features then.
Well, I know guarantee is a strong word, but like that's gonna happen. Like it's gonna.
Has a long list.
There's a long list of things that we're working on.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew knows my list.
Oh,
yeah, so
Let's be clear, he knows my list.
You commented that about scaling. About scaling on our Facebook post, and I told that to him. He's like, he's been telling me that forever. I was like, okay, at least you know.
But that's the thing. That's how important I feel about that feature. Just that one feature alone, because that is a feature that exists in every laser workflow environment that doesn't exist in Mercury, and it is a limitation. Like there's been so many times where, like just a square. I'm like, I want this square to be bigger, and in order for me to do that today, like I would have to draw my own ILDA pattern. And with a square, that's not a big deal. But let's say I want to make the eyeball that exists in the Gobo set. Well, I don't want to have to draw that eyeball. It's already been done, and it's because all these other workflows can do the zoom to 200. Like, I feel like there's a path forward on that, but I don't know the programming of Mercury to know how feasible that is.
Yeah.
So last thing then, plug your company. What do you do? Who do you serve? Where are you? All the good stuff.
Saudi Robot Productions is my company. I'm based out of the Charlotte area, of Fort Mill, South Carolina specifically, and I have done laser events all up and down the East Coast, and want to continue to do so, and be freelance to work with any other production companies that have a laser need that they haven't been able to fill, and just keep making abstract lasers, as well as doing any type of other laser effects or things like that.
Awesome.
That's really cool.
Thank you so much for taking
Cool.
the time today. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome.
That was awesome, Jason. Thank you so much.